Welcome on in, everybody. Tobin here with you. Thanks for checking us on out here at the channel. If you guys could, subscribe here. Subscribe to the Tobin and Leroy Show. Weekdays, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. First off, I want to start this show congratulating Udonis Haslem as the Miami Heat legend. The Heat captain is now an executive. It was announced yesterday by the Miami Heat organization that Udonis Haslem is joining the front office. He has been named the Vice President of Basketball Development. The team statement says his responsibilities include being a resource to the coaching staff, mentoring both Heat and Skyforce players, as well as representing the organization, the community, and business endeavors. So it is great to officially see that UD is with the organization. No surprise, but it is still awesome that it becomes official. And Pat Riley, in his statement on Udonis Haslem, he said, "Born and raised in Miami, UD has been an integral part of the success of the Heat for 20 years. It's great that he has chosen to continue to build his incredible legacy here in Miami, where he belongs." So, congrats to the OG Udonis Haslem. Nobody deserves it more than him, and you got to feel like his fingerprints are going to be all over this organization for years to come. So, incredibly happy for Udonis. He deserves it, and he's already, you can already tell, like, he's been around practice. He's been practicing with the guys, trying to make that impact, and Spo's been saying he's trying to convince him that he wants him to be a resource there. And so I think you'll see, Udonis be part of that whole, contingent there that makes all the decisions eventually, slow roll it in there this year and make his mark with the guys that need it. But he was still doing that this year with, mentoring Jaime Jaquez and, having that connective tissue to all these guys. So really, really great news that Udonis Haslem, of course, officially becomes part of the Miami Heat front office, which is obviously very, very, very deserved, and very happy for UD. Miami Heat are starting up a long road trip where they are going to be basically away from Kaseya Center for the foreseeable future. They got one game over the next 3 weeks on the road. They start tonight in Memphis with a Grizzlies team that has been struggling. The Grizzlies have been off to a really rough start. Obviously, they have the whole suspension of John Morant that they got to deal with, but they have the worst record in the league right now at 1-6. They finally got their first win in their last game, but they have been off to just a dreadful, dreadful start. And it should be an interesting matchup tonight because if Jaren Jackson Jr. goes, we saw this matchup in the preseason, and that was a matchup that Bam Adebayo took very, very personally. And I think we see that Bam takes these big man matchups, these elite big man matchups, very personally. I think we saw this with the Anthony Davis matchup this past game, which, by the way, I should mention. After I mentioned this road, but I got to get into a couple of other things from this Lakers game because there's been some interesting fallout from it, mostly surrounding LeBron James. But yeah, the road trip coming up. They got Memphis, Atlanta on Saturday, then San Antonio on a back-to-back, so you can see Wembanyama. Tuesday, they're in Charlotte, so they get a day off. Then they go to Charlotte, come back for one game next Thursday against the Nets, then back out on the road for 5 more. So out of 10 games, they got 9 out of 10 on the road before they come home finally for a little homestand next week against in the final week of November against Milwaukee and Indiana. A couple of games against Indiana. But man, a lot of road games, man. A lot of road games. And it's gonna be a tough trip for sure. You got the back-to-back there in San Antonio. Atlanta's been playing some good basketball. Chicago's obviously been in a little bit of disarray. Cleveland has a lot of talent, even though they're not off to the most fantastic start. Not the easiest trip in the world, So this is going to be an interesting test for Miami. They have yet to win away from Kaseya Center. They're 0-3. So I'm very interested to see how this turns out. But getting back to the Lakers game, LeBron had a weird day on Twitter yesterday, or X, whatever. And it was interesting because you kind of just feel like, all right, the whole trip is over. That's we talked about this in the game recap. We talked about this yesterday, how LeBron was really upset about the calls, and he was crying about the technical fouls and things that weren't in their control, things that just really bothered him, right? And so the Lakers apparently sent a bunch of clips to the league of calls they thought were missed, which is not uncommon. The Dolphins just did this in the Philly game. The Dolphins sent a bunch of calls to the league saying, hey, I think you missed this, I think you missed this. Lakers felt like they got the wrong end of a lot of calls. Now, in the last 2 minutes, they said that the Heat did not. They said that they did not miss calls. They said that the Heat, the officials got it right. I am not the biggest, last 2 minute report, because it's like, what does it do for you anyway? But LeBron, I think the thing that's funny with LeBron is always a guy who's like, oh, you got to have the full context of things. But he's like, I love that he's commenting on like aggregating website Twitter accounts. But he comments on NBA Central or Dunk Central, whatever the hell they're called now. And it said the NBA has confirmed that all calls made in the last 2 minutes of previous night's Lakers Heat game were correct. There were no missed calls via Ira Winderman. And LeBron goes, the game isn't won or lost in the last 2 minutes. If you know the game, things happen throughout the first, second, and third, and the first 10 minutes of the fourth. That has major impact on the outcomes. It's like, well, yeah, okay, LeBron, we know, but there's not a whole game report, and even if there was, it's not going to go back and change the game. So it's just funny that LeBron was so wound up about this. I remember this last year too, where the Heat beat LeBron James, and he went on to like this whole, it was before they made all their trades, and he went on like this whole spot. Like, it genuinely does seem like it bothers LeBron James when he cannot beat the Miami Heat. I don't know what it is, because I want to get into this next tweet that he has, which I thought was very strange, but he genuinely seems bothered when he loses to this franchise, because like, all right, it's game 7, and he's sitting here lashing out on Twitter about how the game is not lost or won in the last 2 minutes, even though technically it was, because nobody scored in the last 2 minutes and the score stayed the same. But I digress. So he has that the calls were not that a whole bunch of missed calls yesterday, right? But we talked about this in the last video, how he had these quotes about Miami, which were mostly glowing quotes, right? Like, they were mostly like, oh, I loved my time here. One of the organizations that's the pillar of sports, like Patriots, Steelers, Spurs, Heat. Those are the ones of continuity. Loved his time down here. Top-notch franchise. Glowing things about Eric Spoelstra, right? But then he comments on Legion Hoops. So Legion Hoops takes Anthony Cheng's article and they just surmise it to, LeBron says he'd still be dominant if he never went to the Miami Heat, per Anthony Cheng. Agree? And first of all, yeah, I mean, who's ever said LeBron James isn't dominant? It's like, it's such a stupid thing to put out there. Like, LeBron was dominant, even though he wasn't winning in Cleveland. He was a multiple-time MVP. He was a scoring champion. He had all the accolades. He had done, all-stars, first-team All-NBA, took his team to the finals. The guy wasn't not a dominant player before he came to Miami. So what a ridiculous question. But LeBron found the need to comment on this. And this was like a big debate topic yesterday. Like, it swept First Take. And we talked about it on the show a little bit. Talked about it on this channel. But, like, I thought the quotes were like, yeah, they're fine. He almost nailed it. Like, he's been frosty about Miami in the past, but he's become more glowing about the franchise as the years have gone by and all the fences seem, mended. Yeah, there's always a little, chappy things here and there. Remember there was a time where, like, LeBron thought the Heat stole Vice uniforms from his team, and the Heat are like, what? Like, what are you talking about? You guys think you invented Vice uniforms? But every once in a while, like, he would, like, put a post about all the great times there on Instagram, and it was, like, in the midst of him, like, missing the last 3 trips to Miami or not playing the last 3 trips to Miami. So while it's warmed, it's been there's been, some weirdness back and forth, but I'm telling you, it genuinely seems to bother him when he loses to the Heat. I don't know what it is, but he genuinely seems bugged. He's 2-7 since he's left in 2014. Danny Granger for life, winning the grand penny of them all in that Christmas game after LeBron James had gone back to the Cavaliers. But this was LeBron's tweet, and LeBron tweeted out, "You damn right I would still be. I'm chosen. Ain't nothing changing that. Maybe less rings, but dominant from start to finish." And okay, but again, why feel the need to comment on this? First of all, they're your comments. Agree or don't agree. He said it. Why wouldn't he agree with his statement? That's one. Second of all, okay, less rings. Well, kind of an important thing, yeah? Like you said in those same quotes, the whole reason you came down here was to get rings, was to win, and you did it. So I find it strange where there's this whole idea, everybody's like, of course LeBron would have won championships. Of course he would have won all the rings. Of course he would have he have been? I don't know. The thing that's crazy about it is okay, theoretically, let's just say LeBron never came to Miami and stayed in Cleveland and he did what everybody wanted him to do. Was that organization going to get any better? I don't know. Nobody seemed to want to go there in the first place. Chris Bosh didn't want to go there. Nobody wanted. Amari Stoudemire didn't want to go there. Nobody wanted to go to Cleveland to play with LeBron James. He hadn't won yet. He was getting drubbed by the Celtics every single year. Which, by the way, so was D-Wade. D-Wade was tired of getting bounced by the Celtics. But D-Wade had won before, and D-Wade was getting Chris Bosh and was probably going to get a lot more reinforcements with the money that LeBron James, that LeBron James got in his salary when he came to Miami too. So the Heat would have had more moves to make if he wouldn't have been here. So I think the Heat probably would have at least grabbed one in that era. But even if they didn't, the whole thing of everybody coming together and having this mutually beneficial relationship with one another, why is it looked upon like LeBron didn't need Miami? He did. He did need Miami. He needed them. He needed the franchise that actually wanted stars. He needed Chris Bosh to go to a city that he actually wanted to go to. He needed it to be in a place where D-Wade had already won and needed a sidekick like him because, I don't know, he was tired of losing with Mo Williams and Boobie Gibson and J.J. Hickson, who they wouldn't trade for Amari Stoudemire back in the day. I just think this is weird where it's I didn't need those. I didn't need it. I would have been maybe not as many rings. It's well, dude, that's part of your legacy, right? The whole reason we're having a bad GOAT debate, and I think LeBron gets an argument at the GOAT table. Some people don't. Michael Jordan, best player I've ever seen live. I'm just going to tell you, I never watched Michael Jordan live. I've seen Kobe live. I've seen, I've seen LeBron live, D-Wade, 09. These are the best players I've ever seen in person. And, Jimmy Butler's 56. I've seen Jimmy Butler summon some things. It's some of the best basketball I've ever seen played. But, LeBron James on the Miami Heat was a mother bleeping force. He was. Shaq, amazing. But, man, I find all of this stuff that he's frosting at so strange. Maybe less rings. It's all right, but still dominant. All right, nobody said you weren't. Who has ever said that, LeBron was never going to be one of the most dominant players in the league that couldn't do physically whatever? He's still one of the most physically dominant players in the league. Still, at this age, he's still one of the most physically dominant. But the less rings things is kind of a big deal, dude. You having 4 rings and more rings with Miami, half of your rings coming from the Heat. It's kind of a big deal to the legacy. I don't understand what this whole lashing out about it is. It's just very, very strange to me. Very strange. He genuinely seems bothered when he loses to the Miami Heat.